You don't know it, but this is take two. So, what I'm going to be covering in this part 2 of our interactive HTML canvas tutorial is I'm going to talk about all the pieces that are connected together that are going to create the core foundation of what our application is, or what our interactive piece is. So we're going to look at, first we're going to be drawing squares, just how to create a rectangle shape, awesome stuff. We're going to learn about creating objects so that we can create these squares dynamically wherever we want to put them. And then we're going to talk about creating arrays, which is going to store the values of all these cubes in it, or of all the objects which contain all the values of the cubes. So this time all the pieces are really close connected. I still have quick links up there if you want to go ahead and hop to a section, but I'm going to tell you they're all pretty closely aligned. And right now, like I said, I'm only creating the core framework. I'm not creating it exactly how it's going to function because we're going to be adding elements to this later. But as for right now, we're going to be doing a few key things. So in case you don't know already, based on this, how you create a function is you just write function, name the function, and your little parentheses afterwards, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and there's your function. So our first piece is drawing squares. Drawing a square is fairly easy. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to call this function draw squares, because that's what we talked about calling it before. I'm going to close my inputs and I'm going to open the function. I'm going to go ahead, I like to always go ahead and close it, create what's called a stub for it anytime I create a function, so I don't forget that later and then I have functions firing inside functions that shouldn't be. They should be separate or called from somewhere else. So there we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and put in a comment here, and I'm going to say this is called by mouse pause. Because on mouse move is when we're going to go ahead and create these squares. Right now, it's not going to be called by that. I'm just going to call it somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say context.beginPath. Then I'm going to say context.rectangle. And the x-coordinate is going to be mouse x, mouse y, width, let's go ahead and say 15 by 15. And like I said, this is only placeholder values. This is not what it's going to be in the end, because a piece of this assignment is to have a lot of randomization. So these are going to change. I'm actually going to go ahead, I'm going to make this 20 now, and do this as 20. Then I'm going to do mouse x minus 10 and mouse y minus 10. Now, hard coding all these values, definitely a bad idea for your final project. Right now, I'm just testing, running through it, kind of putting in placeholder values so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of what we're doing here. Like I said, this is just the drawing rectangles part. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do context.closePath. I'm going to do context.fill. And refresh, nothing happens. Why is that? It's because we haven't called it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the mouse position event, which is called whenever we move this. I'm going to say draw squares. And that's how you go ahead and you call a function. Why this isn't working might take me a second. Context.rectangle, context.fill. It's because we already have our fill style set to gray, so it's probably drawing them behind, and it's not saying a new type to draw or a new fill style. So we're going to go context.fill style equals black. There we go. Now we've got our cube. So it was drawing it last time. It was just the same color as the background, so you couldn't see it. So yay, we've already got an awesome piece to our puzzle. I was frightened there for a second, thinking I was doing something wrong, but I got this. So need some water so I don't lose my voice by the end of the night. So we've got this drawing squares, which is awesome. But now we want to be able to dynamically store these objects so that right now what's happening is we're drawing it, and then the next frame we're drawing another one, and another one, and another one. And if we clear the rectangle, we can't draw them all again. We can't specify which ones we want to draw. We can't specify any of this stuff. So we're going to move on to part 2, where we are going to declare some objects. First, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to clean up some of my code here where the magic happens. I just like saying that because number 1, it's awesome, and number 2, it's nice to know. Here I'm going to say call magic. That's probably not a good documentation strategy, but it works right now. And here, since we copied and pasted stuff, it's got a lot of crap in between it. Here I'm going to go ahead and document this, say that this is my debugging. So I've got my canvas fill, I'm going to put some space between that and my mouse variables, because this is where my script is actually starting for me. Debug draw squares. So before we have any functions, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to declare some more variables. Now I'm going to move down a little bit because I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to arrange this. And this is where in part 1 I said some people like to draw out all their variables with their plan. I don't like to do that so much because I know that my plan is going to change as I move along. So I leave a little space above and below what I'm working with so that I have space to go back later, I have space to see what's going on, and just spacing things out when you're in development mode is very important. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say what I'm going to call the new object. So the new object class I'm going to say is squares. I'm going to say square equals new object. I'm looking at the camera for some reason. Now this instantly declares it as an object type, and it's not specified any of the inputs for it, any of the properties. So that's what we're going to go ahead and we're going to do next. So we're going to say square dot, let's say, x. Or x location is what I usually use, but I'm going to say square.x to make my hands not get arthritis later. And that's going to be our type. We actually don't have to specify the stuff up here, but I'm just explaining dot y would be our y property. We're not going to declare these up here. This was a foolish idea. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put that down here in the draw squares because that's really where it belongs. So every time that I draw this, I want square x to be equal to the mouse x coordinate, and this to be equal to the mouse y coordinate. Or what I could do is I could say mouse x minus 10 right here and mouse y minus 10 as well. That's going to simplify the math up here, and for our stored object is going to give us these positions, and we're not going to have to worry about this. We're going to move this down here because we want to declare the object before we draw it. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this. And now, instead of using this up here, later on, we're going to use an array value. That I can't show you yet, and it's kind of disappointing because of how these are tied together. I can't go ahead and do another debug with just the objects part working. You're going to have to wait till arrays till we get a new one up and running. So this is where you start getting a little nervous when you're working on this code, is you're not sure if it's going to work right, if you're doing something wrong. It's just, you have to have faith in your own abilities. So it can get nervous, it can get stressful, but when you work on it, you can figure it out. So for the size, I'm going to say square dot size, because these are both the same, because it's a square. I'm not going to dim two of them. Dot size equals, and this is where I'm going to get into some randomization here. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is 20 for right now, but later we're going to go ahead and randomize that. And that's going to be in part 3, so right now we're not going to see that result, but I will put in a placeholder value so we can see that in action. We're going to use math random later on. So, where are we? We're creating objects. We have our x value, our y value, and our size. And this is all going to be stored inside an object called square. And when we put that square into an array, that's going to hold the state of that object. So this is going to be value 1 of the array, and then we're going to have value 2. So in here, later on, we're going to put value 1 of the array dot x, value 2 dot y, and so on and so forth. You're going to see how that goes in just a minute, because I think we should go ahead and move on to that part. Because we have all of our properties that we need to draw just a black square. We can throw in color and stuff later on, and maybe I'll put up a video where we assemble all that stuff, but as for right now, I'm going to go ahead and hold off on that. Because I don't want these tutorials to get too long. That's my idea. And hopefully I'm not being too loud. I have a note that says speak quieter here on my show notes, because last time I had some peaking, so hopefully I'm not too loud. My bad. I get excited. This stuff is really fun for me. Not so much just programming in general. Well, I mean, yeah, kind of. Maybe I should be a programmer. I don't know. But when it's interactive art, that's where it is. Let's not get personal here. That's for my introductory video. So we have this working here. We're declaring an object, and then we're going to draw that in a minute. So for part 3, we're going to go into how we create and store values into an array. So see how we have square equals new object up here? We're going to do something incredibly similar for an array. We're going to say square array. Ooh, I don't really like that. Let's say object array shapes. That's what we're going to call it. Shapes equals new array. That's, again, as simple as it could possibly get. Now with JavaScript arrays, there isn't fixed sizes like there would be in other more hardcore, not hardcore, but strict programming languages. In this, you can have as many arrays, run it up, whatever you want to do. You don't have a fixed length on your array, is what I'm saying. Although at any time, you can say shapes.length and get the size of the array. So if you need to be able to limit it, you can go ahead and use that, maybe use a condition that says if it gets to this, then move your index to another value. But we'll work with indexes later. Or crawlers, as some people call them. But a crawler, I tend not to use that because that can get confused with the search terminology of a web crawler. So now we have a new array, and we're going to say in here, after we build the object, we're going to say shapes dot, and here's where we need that crawler. So I'm going to say var shape crawler, shape index. Sorry, I said I'm using index. I'm trying to get out of that bad habit. And then we're going to go ahead and set the first value equal to 0 at the start. So shapes dot shape index shapes dot, or shapes open bracket shape index equals square. What that's going to do is it's going to say on the current value of our crawler or our index is going to put that value in. So for shape value 0 is going to store this information. So we have an object inside an array. This is an incredibly useful thing. Some people will use multiple arrays to store different values to different properties and just say this array dot 0, this array dot 0, this array dot 0 as the different properties. So property array X, property array Y. This is it creates a lot of unnecessary stuff that you have to be working through. With this, you can just say shape index and then you can just drop a dot behind that and awesome stuff happens. So I'm sorry this one's getting a little drawn out because it's a lot of information. But if you'll just go ahead and stay with me. So here, now when we're drawing this, we can go ahead and we can say shapes shape index. We can say dot, and you can see it brings up the aware values dot x. And here we're going to do shapes shape index dot y. And here we've got shapes shape index dot, we call that size. And here, why type something out again when you can just copy and paste? I'm going to save, refresh, it's still working. Would you look at that? So, it shouldn't actually be working. It's rewriting over the same shape index every time. That's why. So this time it's not actually saving our values, so we can't redraw them all. It's still drawing one after another in the same value of the array. So now what we have to do is we have to add to the value of the array at the end of this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say shape index plus equals 1. There we go. DEX. It should not be working. No, it should still be working. Okay. So it's still working and it's storing all of our values. What we're going to do next is part 3. And in part 3, I'm going to go into how we can make this draw everything at the same time so that we can start playing around with everything in there. So what we've got working here is we've got this writing values into an array. And actually, let's go ahead and let's confirm that. Let's go ahead and we're going to say I'm going to move this. Sorry, I'm used to Photoshop going back and forward in history. That's what I was trying to type there. Instead of mouse X, mouse Y, well, we can go ahead and we can put a break in here. Actually, let's just go ahead and throw in some more of these. Plus. And we're going to do shape index. We can see that it's going up in the shape index every time. So we know that we are indeed moving up in the shape index and we are drawing the current index that is on it. What we're going to do next time is we're going to draw earlier values all at the same time, so that instead of drawing one at a time, it refreshes the entire canvas. What this is going to allow us to do is add and erase values or modify existing values and then have them redrawn so that these can fall and we can simulate physics. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do next time. That's all I have for you today, and I'll see you guys next time in part 3.